what's your message to the Iowans generally?
Look, we've got a government in Washington that works great for folks who are rich. Works great for billionaires, works great for giant multinational companies. It's just not working for the rest of America. And we have a chance to change that in 2020. I want a government that doesn't just work for billionaires. I want a government that works for the rest of our families.
Fair enough. So the wealth divide takes a lot of different forms. Whether you're in a city, whether you're in the country, I think we've seen a lot in the last few years. A feeling of a growing divide, not only in wealth, but also from rural to urban, from maybe coastal to middle America. What about your platform moving forward? Do you think could help bridge those gaps, or at least the feeling of those gaps?
So let me just underline how I see this. I think the real gap in America is opportunity. I'm someone whose daddy ended up as a janitor, but I wanted to be a public school teacher, and I had a chance to go to a 4-year commuter college that cost $50 a semester. That's opportunity. I became a special needs teacher, and it catapulted me into America's middle class. That kind of opportunity isn't out there for our kids today. So today, there's a huge difference for young people based on whether or not mom and dad can write a check to send them to college, or mom and dad can't do that, and so they've got to either not go or borrow or do some combination of the two. And that's true even for kids who don't go to college, who need technical training, who want other opportunities. What I worry about in America is not just the division in wealth, it's that division in opportunity. So one of my biggest proposals now is to say folks who've amassed a fortune above $50 million get taxed 2% on that fortune, the part above. It's your 50 millionth and first dollar. And we're going to take that money and put it back in so that we reduce the student loan debt burden, so that we can provide universal child care for folks who are trying to work and manage a family, so we can invest in pre-K and pre-pre-K for every one of our kids, so that we can invest in infrastructure. It's about how we take just a little bit from those fortunes and say we want to reinvest it in America, in opportunity, in urban and rural, in our little kids, and make sure our seniors are secure. We want to build an America that works for everybody.
Absolutely. In a few recent polls, Iowa's coming up near the top of the list as far as wealth goes. It's a fairly affluent state. I imagine some of the argument from people who would oppose the wealth tax, things like that, is that would discourage advancement, discourage that drive to increase your own wealth. Do you put any store in that?
You really think someone's going to say, gosh, here I am at a fortune worth $100 million, and because I pay a 2% tax, I don't think I want to take that fortune to 101 million or 110 million. I mean, I just think that argument makes no sense. What we're talking about here is not an income tax. We're talking about a wealth tax. A lot of people inherited it, and a lot of people built the fortune themselves. All this says is just be a little bit fair about it. Every homeowner in Iowa pays a wealth tax every year. It's called property tax. Just because you own it, you got to pay a little bit of tax. But here's the deal right now. The top 0.1%, which is what I'm talking about, the richest 75,000 families in America, this year will pay an estimated 3.6% of their total wealth in taxes. Okay. The rest of America, the 99.9%, will be paying about 7.4% of their wealth in taxes. I just want a little fairness in the system. Those folks built great fortunes, good for them. But they did it in America. They did it by employing people the rest of us help pay to educate. They did it by moving their goods and services on roads the rest of us also help to build. They did it protected by the police and the firefighters that the rest of us also help pay for. And all we're saying is, you make it big, just a little bit back into the kitty. And here's the thing. If we put the wealth tax in place, we could pay for universal child care and early learning, pre-K and pre-pre-K, for every kid in America and have $2 trillion left over to invest in other areas. You know, that's a lot. That's how you get the playing field just a little bit more level.
I'd like to continue on with the universal child care idea. That's been a huge problem in Dubuque recently. A few organizations have been partnering with community colleges to try to do that internally. But talk a little bit more about that plan and dollars and cents. What does it cost us? What does it cost us to not have it?
Right. So the need is extreme. People around this country are paying an average, many of them, of 20% of their take-home pay, some 25%, some even more, for child care. In 26 states in America now, the cost of child care for an infant is more than the cost of tuition at the state university. And families got to be paying that in real time, not borrowing a student loan and paying it over time. It's crushing a lot of families. And think of it this way. I'm somebody who got my first teaching job, big deal for me. It was a tenure track job. I was so excited, and I had 2 little ones. And when I headed off into that first teaching job, boy, it was hard. I had 2 babies. I'm trying to learn to teach a class. I'm trying to learn to do my research. I'm washing dishes. I'm doing laundry at 11 o'clock at night. It was hard. I can do hard. It was exhausting. I can do exhausting. And then the babysitter quit. And it all blew apart. And over the space of the next few months, I went through daycare and then a different daycare and then a neighbor and then back to another daycare. And finally, one night in the spring, my Aunt Bee called me. She's a 78-year-old widow. She just called to see how I was doing. She called from Oklahoma City. I was down in Houston at the time in my first job. And she said, "How you doing, Betsy?" And I started to cry. And without even thinking about it, I said, "I'm going to quit my job. I love this job." And I said, "I'm going to quit. I just can't do it. I am failing my children. I can't make these pieces work." And my Aunt Bee said the 12 words that changed my life. "I can't get there tomorrow, but I'll come on Thursday." And she arrived on Thursday with 7 suitcases and a Pekingese named Buddy, and stayed for 16 years. And that's how I got a chance to teach, to start a career. How many women of my generation got sidelined because they didn't have an Aunt Bee? How many women of my daughter's generation have been sidelined because they don't have an Aunt Bee? How many women and men today are sidelined, don't get their education, or don't take that first job, or don't take the promotion because it's more hours, because they don't have an Aunt Bee and they can't hold the child care part together. We want to see a more productive America. We want to see an America that's full of opportunity. We want to see an America where everybody gets a chance. Then we need to make this investment in child care. And with my ultra millionaires tax, we can pay for it 100 cents, 100%, and not raise taxes 1 thin dime on any of the working people in middle America. We can do that.
Okay, great. So yeah, at the front of every discussion in this region, it seems, are the problems of population loss and dwindling workforce. We can cheer on low unemployment, but now we don't have the workers to fill our jobs. And what part of your plan do you think might help that in areas like Dubuque that are seeing people go to cities, leave home, leave small towns, leave their family farms to look for more opportunity?
So let me just put a few ideas. I've got a lot of them that I could work on here, but I just want to put a few on the table. First one is, if we cut the student loan debt burden, the need to get to a city where the pay is higher and you can make that monthly nut on student loans goes down. That's some number of people who get to stay. If we make sure we've made the investment in childcare so that young families, whether they're living in a big city or whether they're living in Dubuque or whether they're living out on a farm, can get help, can get their kids to pre-K and a pre-K that's going to give them the kind of educational start that will give them a strong place in life, then that's another, makes it much easier for people to stay. I have a housing bill that invests in housing in urban and rural areas. We have a problem in America right now that we've had two things change quickly over time. The first is private developers have gone to the high end. You want to buy a McMansion, there's plenty of housing available for you. But if you want middle class housing, working housing, affordable housing, a first-time home, they're not making those kind of investments. And I'm not mad at private developers, they go where the profits are. But the other half is the government has quit investing to help subsidize that housing, to help get it going. The kind of housing I grew up in, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, and a garage that they converted so my 3 brothers could sleep in it. The kind of entry-level housing that helps people get going. We invest more of that across rural America. That's another reason to be able to stay. And then I'll make one more, and that is the infrastructure investments we make. Look, I know right over here we talk about, cracks in the locks. Because we have not made the investments in infrastructure for decades now. The advantage to making the investments in those infrastructures is partly it keeps business flowing up and down the river, but partly it produces darn good jobs from day one. We invest in infrastructure, and I want to be blunt. We make sure that those jobs are covered by Davis-Bacon, prevailing wages, that these are good jobs. That's a reason for people to be here. And it's like anything. You get a start, it's like planting a seed in the ground. You get a start, you have a big project, a building project that's going on. Folks have reason to move in. And not all of them will stay, but if you've got the other pieces in place, some of them are going to stay and build a more robust economy.